Hey guys, Laura here with STP. This video is a walkthrough of Bluebook Test 7 with the harder second modules for English and Math. Before we get started, make sure to like and subscribe to this channel. And also, we are giving away one of our free workbooks right now. So if you head to our website, I'll link it up here and subscribe to our newsletter. You can get that workbook free to practice more of the strategies that you see me using in this video. All right, we're going to start with English Module 1. I like to work at the end of the module backwards, so my brain just works better that way. The questions at the end are easier. We're going to start at number 27 and work to number 1, but we will link in the description below to any specific question that you want to look at, so you can definitely jump around in this video. All right, let's start with 27. It says, the student wants to compare some disadvantages of docked and dockless bike share programs. Okay, so I want disadvantages, and I'm not going to read the notes right now because I might be able to just fall on one answer that does that. So A says, docked programs offer order and consistency. That's not a disadvantage. B says dockless programs are inexpensive to implement, but they are less flexible than docked programs. Well, that's just focusing on the dockless programs. And again, they're giving like an advantage. So I don't like that one either. C says docked programs are more resource intensive. Okay, that's a bad thing. And then it says, but they avoid some of the latter's organizational challenges. So the latter is referring to the dockless programs because they mentioned it second in this answer choice. And this is a negative for dockless programs. So we get a negative for docked programs and dockless programs. That's the right answer. I'm not even going to read D. I'm so confident in that. I'm going to move on. And then what I might do is flag it to come back to later to check D. All right. And this one, it says the student wants to present the conclusion of Zhen Wang and colleagues' 2016 study. Which choice most effectively does that? Okay. So again, not going to read the notes right now. I'm looking for a conclusion of a study. So let's go through and check these. It says, like Tibetan Mastiffs, Tibetan wolves can withstand hypoxic conditions at high altitudes. Well, that sounds like it could be a conclusion. B, both Tibetan Mastiffs and Tibetan wolves have mutations in their genes, which prevent excess hemoglobin production and boost hemoglobin's oxygen carrying ability, respectively. Okay, I'm already starting to go, I'm not really sure what their conclusion is. So this is one where we're going to need the notes. So when I go over here, it says Wang and colleagues determined, that's a synonym for conclusion, that the dogs first acquired these mutations by interbreeding with Tibetan wolves. Now, when they say dogs, they're talking about the mastiffs. So the dogs acquired those genetic mutations by interbreeding with Tibetan wolves around 24,000 years ago. Okay, I want to look for something that says that. None of those say that yet. C says, in addition to preventing excess hemoglobin production and mutation Tibetan mastiffs. Okay, C says nothing about how they came from Tibetan wolves or they interbred with Tibetan wolves. So let's look at D. By interbreeding with Tibetan wolves around 24,000 years ago, Tibetan Mastiffs acquired the genetic mutations that enable them to withstand hypoxic conditions. That sounds like what they determined. That is their conclusion. I'm going to go with D. All right, let's look at 25. So 25 says, the student wants to contrast the song Poor Miner's Farewell with the song Bring Him Back Home. Okay, we need a contrast, which means we want to see where they're different. Let's go through the answers. We have the song Poor Miner's Farewell and Bring Him Back Home both raised. Ooh, I don't like that word both. It means they're comparing, not contrasting. B, while both are protest songs, Poor Miner's Farewell is about coal miners, whereas Bring Him Back Home is about anti-apartheid. Okay, that whereas is a contrast word. That shows their differences. I'm confident in that. I'm going to move on. All right, now we're into transitions. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to read the first sentence and then the second sentence to see how they relate. And I'm looking at the answer choices just to get a sense of what they give me. So hence is a causation, just a heads up for you guys. However, is a contrast. Admittedly is kind of context specific. Same with specifically. So let's see what we've got going on. We have In 2021, a model developed by astrophysicist Catherine Zucker and her research team revealed that the same supernovas responsible for the creation and ongoing expansion of the local bubble, a 14 million year old cavity in the Milky Way, are likely responsible for the formation of new stars. Okay, so we've got supernovas responsible for local bubble, also are responsible for forming new stars. Blank, this model detailed how the bubble's expansion trapped interstellar clouds of gas and dust that became stars upon their eventual collapse. Okay, this is not contrasting, so I'm going to get rid of B. This doesn't sound like a causation situation. It's not if P then Q. It's not, because they're responsible for the formation of new stars. It detailed how the bubble's expansion trapped interstellar clouds. Honestly, when I see this word detailed, it means they're going into more detail about how it did it to form stars. So I want to pick specifically. All right, let's look at 23. So we have similarly, which is a type of support word. We have indeed, which is a reinforcer. We have instead, which is a contrast. And in addition, which is another type of support word. Please note the difference between similarly and in addition. Similarly, you're comparing with the sentence before it, two things. In addition, you're just adding on extra details. So although we can call them both supports, you can actually choose between them. So we have Marcel Duchamp intended his 1917 so-called ready-made sculpture fountain to challenge then prevailing conceptions about the nature of art. Okay, so he's going to challenge them. That really stands out for me. He intended for something to be, but maybe his intention isn't reality. Let's see. Blank Duchamp's fountain did just that, raising the question, That means it's reinforcing the sentence before it, telling us how he challenged it. I'm going to go with indeed. All right, let's look at 22. We have guard cells are specialized cells that are part of a plant's pores. These cells help regulate the amount of carbon dioxide a plant takes in. They help regulate a plant's water loss. Okay, they're telling us two things that they help regulate: the amount of carbon dioxide and a plant's water loss. We just need a support. It's adding an extra detail, so I'm going to go with additionally. Famous for its 4-degree tilt, the Leaning Garrisoned Tower is a popular attraction in Bologna's city center. However, measurements taken in 2023 showed that the tower was rotating in a concerning way. Okay, so the tower was rotating in a concerning way. Blank city officials closed the area around the tower. Okay, well, because it was concerning, they closed the area. That is definitely causation. We're going to pick as a result. All right, now we're on to grammar. So we have these, they, it, and this. So we need to pick the right pronoun based on what the subject is. So it says, when a given industry carries, okay, I know industry is the subject because it's doing this verb carries, and all of this is non-essential. So when a given industry carries high infrastructural startup costs and other barriers that discourage competition, it often consists of just one or two suppliers. It has to be C. It is singular, going with industry. All right, we have different options here. Now, I'm not seeing a semicolon up in here with an and, so I know they're not using semicolons to separate items in a list. So immediately I'm going to get rid of C and A because a period and a semicolon both separate two complete sentences. So now it's down to, do I need a comma or do I need a dash? I already know I'm going to pick a comma because it likely goes with this comma to separate out a non-essential clause, and I don't see any other dashes in this sentence, but let's just double check. With a blend of traditional design elements such as arched Gothic ceilings and modern ones such as floor-to-ceiling windows, transitional design splits the difference between old and new, a mixture that is increasingly seen in home interiors in the U.S. Okay, this comma, windows, such as floor-to-ceiling windows, we need a comma there because it's actually separating out this non-essential clause right here. So it actually goes with this comma. I was wrong. It doesn't go with that comma. But anyway, we need a comma. Commas go with commas, dashes go with dashes. All right, let's go to 18. Now, when I look at 18, all four of these answer choices, I only see one that can separate two complete sentences. When that happens, 95% of the time, that's the right answer. So I'm already leaning towards C. What I'm going to do is I'm going to divide it up and I'm going to read the first part to see if that's a complete sentence. We have first century scholars dreamed about locating a copy of this legendary lost work. Boom, that's definitely a complete sentence. Now I'm going to read the next part, which is that fantasy became reality in 2022 when researchers uncovered traces of the star catalog on a palimpsest, a reused parchment. Also a complete sentence, definitely reinforces what I thought. The answer is C. All right, so this one, it looks like it is somewhat of a parallelism question. We have has been, which is present perfect, will be, future tense. Characterized past tense is characterized, which is present tense. So featuring jagged peaks of black ink surrounded by hazy swirls of blue and green paint, Zhang Di's 1983 painting Panorama of Mount Lu is inspired by the tradition of King Lu Shanshui, a type of Chinese landscape painting characterized by the use of blue and green hues to depict ethereal, otherworldly landscapes. It needs to be characterized to keep this part non-essential. That's non-essential. Our main sentence is up here because our subject is up here, our verb is up here, and our complete thought is up here. So if you pick any of the other answer choices with a full-on verb tense, it's going to basically violate the comma rule. A comma can't separate two complete sentences. So just pick characterized to keep that as a dependent clause. All right, 16. This one's easy. Pronoun trick. They have been, they were, they are, he is, it's going to be be. And this, I guess, is singular, which is why we say is a wearable washboard. All right, now we're on to logically completes the text. I saved these for last, so we're going to skip these. I actually really like to skip 15, 14, 13, and 12. So I can break up the reading passages into two chunks. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down to 11. I'm going to work to number 1, and then I'll come back and do those other 4 questions. So we have which choice best describes data. Okay, if I see describes data, you probably don't need the graph. It's an English question. It's smoke and mirrors. This graph is likely fluff. So what I'm going to do is I want to find the conclusion, okay? So if I go down here, it looks like the conclusion is right here. Concluded that this relative ranking of candidates persisted among the participants with high ignobility scores. Okay, well, I don't know what this relative ranking is. We have like a pronoun phrase, so I need to go back to find out. I think I'm going to start here with a survey. A survey recorded participants' ratings of the candidates' likability and showed that across participants, ignoble trait candidates were less likable than admirable trait candidates. Okay, I don't know what ignoble trait means, so I'm going to go back. Oh, they're people who are cynical, so it's cynicism. Well, that makes sense. They're going to like them less if they're more cynical. So they're less likable than the admirable trait candidates, which are people who are agreeable and like good qualities. Okay, here's the key though. When you see a contrast phrase, really pay attention and lean into that. This is the important part. However, when the researchers factored in the participants' own personality trait scores on a scale of 1 to 7, they concluded that this relative ranking of candidates persisted except among participants with high ignobility scores. So what that means is participants with high ignobility would rank others with high ignobility better. All right. So when I go through my answer choices, it says, A says there was a strong positive correlation between participants' ignobility scores and admirable trait candidates' likability ratings, but there was no correlation between ignobility scores and ignoble trait candidates' likability ratings. That's not true. This is wrong according to what they found. They did find a correlation, so we're going to get rid of A. B says participants with an ignobility score of 5 or less rated admirable trait candidates as more likable than ignoble trait candidates, whereas participants with an ignobility score of 6 or more rated ignoble trait candidates as equally likable or even more likable. This goes with the claim because Participants with high ignobility scores will rank ignoble trait candidates as maybe as likable or more likable than the other candidates. So we're going to go with B. Let's just read C and D because I have a feeling some of you guys are going to comment and say, why not C? Why not D? C says overall participants rated admirable trait candidates as quite likable, and that rating was not significantly affected by the ignobility scores. No, that's not true because the last sentence said except among participants with high ignobility scores. D says unlike participants with an ignobility score of 6, participants with an ignobility score either greater or less than 6 gave different likability ratings. No, we want high ignobility. So if we're comparing a 6 to a 7 and saying they're different, those are both high. That's also wrong. All right, let's go down to 10. 10 says, which choice best states the main idea of the text? Okay, so we've got conservationists worldwide are working to protect ecosystems from habitat destruction and biodiversity loss. And in many cases, initiatives that rely on natural features or processes can help address such challenges. Okay, in response to a rapidly dwindling population of blueback salmon, the QI Nation, a tribe in Washington state, partnered with the conservation organization Wild Salmon Center to restore naturally occurring log jams in the Quinault River. The log jams create shady pools. Okay, so it sounds like the main idea is there are initiatives that rely on natural features to address ecosystem challenges, and then they go on to talk about a partnership between a tribe and then a center. So let's take a look. We have a partnership between the nation and Wild Salmon Center shows the importance of collaborative approaches. Well, I don't know if that's the full thing. That is one sentence, but that's not really the main idea of this. It's like a detail giving us an example. So I'm going to get rid of A. B says nature-based approaches can be effective ways to achieve conservation goals. That sounds like a broader statement. I like that more for a main idea. And that's exactly what they did in that partnership. And that's exactly what the first sentence talks about. It says, rely on natural features. That's basically your synonym for nature-based approaches. So I'm going to hold B. C says, as indicated by a recent project, log jams help the blueback salmon thrive. No, that's a detail at the very end. That's not the main idea. D says, scientists now realize that nature-based conservation methods offer better long-term solutions to environmental issues than methods that are not nature-based do. We have no comparison with nature-based and non-nature-based, nor did they talk about it being a long-term solution, so that's just an irrelevant answer. So we're going to go with B. All right, which statement about M. robustus and the octopus garden is best supported by the text? We have in 2018, scientists discovered an immense aggregation of MR, pearl octopuses, along a hydrothermal vent 3,200 meters beneath the Earth's surface. Water temperatures at the site, named the Octopus Garden, climb as high as 11 degrees Celsius, much warmer than the ambient 1.6 degrees Celsius typical at this depth. Based on observations made over 3 years, scientists concluded that temperatures at the site likely confer reproductive benefits. Oh, okay. So temperatures at the site, and when they say the site, they mean the Octopus Garden. They confer reproductive benefits. The site is used exclusively for reproduction. Now, I see not only is the last sentence usually like the most important one, guys, but I also see a unique punctuation mark, which tells me this part is going to be really important. So it says 6,000 M. robustus adults, hatchlings, and eggs were observed at the garden, but no juveniles were present. Okay, adults are reproducing. Eggs are what they lay right after. Hatchlings, they just came out of the eggs. There's no juveniles. That's interesting. Let's go through the answers. M. robustus leave the octopus garden upon reaching an intermediary stage of development. Well, that is true because if you go from egg to juvenile to adult, you are in the intermediary stage here. So the juveniles must be leaving the octopus garden and going elsewhere. I'm going to go with A. I'm not confident in that one. So I'll flag this to come back to later, but A is a perfect match because that's exactly what it's saying in the last sentence. All right, number 8, we have based on the text, how would the author of text 2 most likely respond to what some researchers contend as described in text 1? So text 1 says, little is known about how plate tectonics, wherein slabs of Earth's crust move over, under, away from, and against one another, began. Some researchers contend that tectonic movements began around 3 billion years ago, often noting that computer models of Earth's mantle temperature at the time indicate that the mantle would have been sufficiently molten to enable the plates to move. Okay, so they used computer models. They estimated it happened around 3 billion years ago. The mantle would be sufficiently molten to enable the plates to move. Let's see what text 2 says. They're probably going to disagree, by the way, because this is a hug slug passage, and expect text 2 to not agree fully with text 1. Text 2 says, ultimately, any plausible claim about the inception of tectonic movement must rest on empirical evidence from the geological record. Researcher W.C. and his team analyzed the geochemistry of zircon crystals to gain insight into the chemical composition of the magma from which the crystals formed, and based on the data, compellingly argue that plate tectonics may have occurred as early as 4.2 billion years ago. Much earlier than was originally thought, so 4.2 billion versus 3 billion. Also, instead of using computer models, they actually analyzed geochemistry of zircon crystals because they said they needed empirical evidence from the geological record, essentially from Earth itself. So let's go through the answers and find that difference. So we have, by suggesting that the temperature of Earth's mantle, okay, first of all, I know they weren't really focused on the temperature. Let's get rid of A. B, by distinguishing between computer models of Earth's mantle temperature that reliably predict the onset of plate tectonics and those that do not? No, because text 2 did not even touch on computer models at all. They said the geological record. C, by indicating that computer models of Earth's mantle temperature are still being improved such that new models tend to be much more reliable than their predecessors. No, same thing as B. D says by asserting that a more definitive form of evidence than the computer models suggests a different timeline. Different timeline, 4.2 billion instead of 3 billion. And a definitive form of evidence would be the geological record from the zircon crystals. We are going to go with D. All right, number 7, which choice best describes the main purpose of the text? So we have pteropods are small swimming snails with thin, delicate calcium carbonate shells. These animals are thought to be especially vulnerable to ocean acidification due to calcium carbonate's susceptibility to dissolution at lower pH values. Victoria L. Peck and colleagues recently found that the peristratum, a protective coating on pteropods' outer shells, prevents this dissolution when intact. Okay, so already I'm seeing some things in this. They're thought to be especially vulnerable to ocean acidification. So that sounds like an old belief to me. And then they said that they recently found, so here's a new idea or new discovery, that their protective coating prevents this dissolution when intact. Interesting. So they're not as vulnerable to the ocean acidification as we once thought. Moreover, the team was surprised to discover, That's something I always want you to look for is like the word surprise, because that will show up as a synonym in the answer choices. That even when the periostraticum is breached, pteropods can still mitigate damage by rebuilding the shell inner wall. So it sounds like they got it together. These guys are not getting damaged by the acidification. Let's go through the answers. A, to call for additional research on biological nope, they're not asking for additional research. B, and let me just write no on that. To discuss a conclusion drawn in the study of calcium carbonate's role in protecting the periostraticum of pteropods. But I'm not really sure if that's the main purpose. I didn't hear much about calcium carbonate's role. That kind of feels like a minor detail. Let me hold that though. C says to address some of the ways the ocean acidification has altered pteropod behavior. Definitely didn't talk about pteropod behavior. D, to present findings that suggest that a concern about the effects of ocean acidification on pteropod shells may be unwarranted. Yeah, hey guys, why are you concerned? Like these guys are really not, it's not that bad for them. They can repair their walls. They've got this protective coating. It's definitely D. All right, we have which choice best describes the function of the underlined phrase. So we have in the early days of television in the 1940s, many people thought that U.S. television programs would rely on the financial support of ad agencies and commercial sponsors. Oop, here we go. Here's another old belief. Many people thought U.S. television programs would rely on financial support of ad agencies, much like radio did. Do you guys know why they're putting this passage in here, by the way? Because the same thing is happening now with streaming services. Not to go off on a tangent, but I was just complaining last night that Netflix has commercials, Hulu has commercials, they all have commercials. They didn't in the beginning, though, much like way back when television didn't and radio did. So now streaming is becoming like cable. Anyways, that's just something I noticed with the SAT. They like to bring in old historical passages that are relevant to today. But advertisers had hesitated to jump into a new space, particularly at a time when the manufacturing of new television sets was stalled due to the U.S.'s involvement in World War II. Okay, they hesitated to jump into this new space, and then they explained a reason why. There was involvement in World War II. They were busy doing other stuff. So that underlying part is just explaining why they were hesitant or a reason why. So we've got A, it compares the beginnings of radio. Nope, that's not what it's doing. B, it identifies a specific reason behind some advertisers' hesitance. That's exactly right. U.S.'s involvement in World War II. Let's just read the others just to be sure. C, it describes how broadcasters attempted to convince advertisers. Nope, it's not doing that. D, it explains why a type of television programming was popular. Definitely not doing that. Okay, let's move to 5. Which choice best describes the function of the underlined sentence in the text as a whole? So we have in the 1950s, scientists didn't know much about the ocean floor. Many scientists at the time believed the ocean floor was mostly flat. Okay, so that gives us the old belief of what they thought. So it identifies a scientific belief that Tharp and Heezen showed to be wrong. Well, did they show it to be wrong? Let's keep reading. But geologist Marie Tharp and her research partner proved this idea was wrong. Okay, perfect. A is right. Let's keep moving on. 4. Okay, we have a words and context question. So we have in 1776, the United States sent Ben Franklin to France to try to win the country's support in the United States fight for independence from Great Britain. Franklin was very popular in France. This, okay, we need basically a synonym for that he's popular, this esteem. None of these other ones mean popular. All right, the recently observed gamma ray burst lasted for 200 seconds. Blank for a burst generated by the merger of neutron stars. Bursts caused by neutron mergers typically last fewer than 2 seconds. So this is extremely long. So I want to find a word that means like longer in the blank. So, okay, it's an oddity. It's weird because they typically only last for 2 seconds. All right. What does the word clear most nearly mean? The water was so clear it was almost invisible. Well, the only one that makes sense is transparent. Transparent basically means like the light can go right through it. You wouldn't describe or you wouldn't use any of these words in that context. Botanist Al Kowaleski has pointed out that maple trees already thrive in a wide variety of climates and thus may blank changes in climate better than some other trees. Well, if they thrive in a wide variety, they may adapt to changes better than some other tree species. So, that was the answer. See, I thought of a word first and then it ended up being the exact answer choice. So that's a strategy you can use. Think of a word that you would put in the blank first. All right, let's go back to the reading ones I didn't do yet. All right, number 12. Which finding, if true, would most directly weaken the underlying claim? Okay, we have to be careful. We want to weaken it. So it says, let's start at the top because this one is a timeline one and I just want to get the entire context. Puerto Rico is an island in the Caribbean Sea. Thank you for telling us that. Indigenous people there started raising guinea pigs about 1,700 years ago. That's pretty cool. Guinea pigs had originally been domesticated much earlier in both Colombia and Peru. So, were guinea pigs brought to Puerto Rico from Colombia or from Peru? Ancient Caribbean trade routes connected Puerto Rico with Colombia, but not with Peru. Therefore, guinea pigs in Puerto Rico probably came from Colombia and descended from Colombia guinea pigs. Well, what would weaken it? Maybe a statement that says they actually descended from Peru? Maybe there was a trade route that they discovered that they didn't realize that actually went through Peru. I don't know. Let's find out. A. Ancient guinea pigs in Puerto Rico were genetically less similar to ancient guinea pigs in Colombia than to ancient guinea pigs in Peru. Ooh, that would make sense possibly because if they're less similar to guinea pigs in Colombia and more similar to guinea pigs in Peru, that would imply they came from Peru instead, which would weaken the claim that they came from Colombia. Peru. I don't know what I just did there. I spelled Peru with an I on the end. That was crazy. Came from Peru. B. Guinea pigs are common in ancient Puerto Rican art. Definitely irrelevant. C. Modern breeds of guinea pigs don't look like images of guinea pigs in ancient art. Again, irrelevant. The guinea pig population of ancient Colombia was much larger. Also irrelevant. Oh my gosh, this was almost too easy. Let's go to 13. Which finding of true would most directly support the researcher's hypothesis? Okay. So it says in the last sentence, the researchers hypothesized that interactions indicating high levels of cognitive engagement with ad content would result in relatively high levels of ad recall. What's ad recall? Let's go back up and check. Ad recall measures how memorable an advertising campaign is. So basically, their hypothesis says interactions indicating high levels of cognitive engagement with ad content would result in relatively high levels of, okay, so increased engagement basically equals increased recall. Well, what constitutes ad engagement? So there's different levels of cognitive engagement. Commenting on or sharing a post is more cognitively demanding than clicking on embedded links. Okay, so if you share a post or comment on it, that is more engaging than just clicking a link. Clicking a link is pretty passive. Let's go through the answer choices. I want to find something that shows higher engagement means higher ad recall where they remember it and it's memorable. A says users who interacted with an ad were much more likely to do so by clicking on the ad's like button than they were to interact with the ad in any other way. We're not talking about likelihood of interacting with the ad. There's no ad recall in this answer choice. That's out. B says users who interacted with an ad were significantly more likely to purchase the advertising product at the time. We're not talking about likelihood of purchase. We're talking about how much it's remembered. So get rid of B. C says compared with users who clicked on links in an ad, users who commented on the same ad. Oop, that means higher engagement. We're significantly more likely to remember seeing the ad. Oh, higher recall. C is the one we want. All right, we have which choice most effectively uses data from the table. That might mean we need the graph. So be careful with that. I don't know if the graph is necessarily fluff. We probably are going to have to look at it. So we have a student is researching rotating radio transients, a subclass of pulsar stars characterized by short pulses of radio waves. Did I really need to read that? No, that was fluff. Sorry. Sometimes at the beginning under a graph, they're going to give you preliminary information. You can ignore it. It says the time between consecutive pulses of an RRAT is referred to as a period. Okay, so that's basically the time between pulses. That's the period. Looking at the table, the student determines that. Okay, the first one, J061403 has the shortest amount of time between consecutive pulses. Okay, is this the shortest one out of all the periods? Yes, it is. Answer is A. All right, this is the last one for the first English module. We have logically completes the text. So let's go ahead and read this. Narwhals are shy whales that live in the remote Arctic Ocean. Some of them have a long tusk like a unicorn horn with sensitive nerves. Narwhals are known for this tusk, but many actually don't have one and its purpose is unknown. One group of scientists came up with a possible purpose in 2014. The scientists suggested that the tusk may help narwhals determine when water around them is likely to start freezing and becoming dangerous for them. Marine biologist Kristen L. disagrees with that idea, though. Ooh, okay, so this is the important part. Here we have a contrast word. She disagrees with it. Here's her reasoning. She reasons that if narwhal's tusk serves an important purpose, then it's most likely that, okay, here's what I'm thinking. I'm going to come up with a conclusion first. If the tusk serves an important purpose where they can detect when the water is becoming ice, wouldn't everyone have one? That would be what I would conclude. They should all have it then. So, A, some narwhals would seek a new habitat. No, fewer marine animals would also have tusks. No, more narwhals would have a tusk. Bingo. That's exactly what I was thinking. All right, guys, that's it for Module 1. All right, guys, if you are finding this video helpful so far, show me some love, smash the subscribe button and notification bell below so you don't miss out on future content from me. Let's go ahead and look at 27. We're on Module 2. I'm working backwards. Again, links are going to be in the description if you want to jump around to specific questions. So we have the student wants to place Einstein's argument within its historical context. Okay, that's important. So I basically need two things. I need his argument and I need the historical context. So let's check out the answers. A, during the dawn of quantum theory, okay, well, that would be the historical context. Einstein maintained that the independent reality of some subatomic entities, although Bohr's opposing interpretation would become the widely accepted view. Okay, Einstein maintained is a synonym for argument. That sounds good. I'm going to hold A. B says that the 1927 Solvay Conference in Physics, Einstein disagreed with Bohr's argument. Okay, just because he disagreed with Bohr's argument, this is focused on Bohr's argument, so we don't have Einstein's. So that's out. C says the attendees of the 1927 Solvay Conference were among the preeminent scientists of their era, including Einstein. Again, they just glossed over and said he opposed Bohr's proposal, but they did not say what his argument is. Get rid of C. D says in 1927, E and B engaged in a famous debate. B's argument, okay, again, didn't touch on Einstein's argument. The only one that does that is A. All right, so this one we have the student wants to present an overview of the study's findings. Well, an overview is going to be like a generalization. It's going to be like almost like a summary of it. Let's look for that. The 2021 study determined the information rate. Okay, this is like a conclusion of 17 languages and bits of information conveyed per second. Well, honestly, though, that still sounds pretty general. It's just saying that they found the information rate of 17 languages. I might hold that one. Researchers found that information was conveyed more quickly in Spanish. Okay, this is too specific to be an overview. And it's just showing the conclusion. Vietnamese had the 16th fastest syllable rate. Okay, same thing, guys, too specific. Though some of the languages differed in number of syllables spoken per second, all 17 conveyed information at roughly the same rate. Okay, okay, we want the study's findings, guys. We want an overview of the study's findings. They tell us that they determined something in A, but they don't tell us what it was. D says all 17 conveyed information at roughly the same rate. That's actually the finding, so that is better than A. All right, let's look at this one. We have the student wants to indicate the year Yosemite Falls was completed. Honestly, I laughed when I saw this because this is so easy. The answer obviously is C. It was completed in 1930. How is this a Module 2 question? I am flabbergasted. All right, we have the student wants to identify what type of scientist Chaudhry is. So it says a scientist who studies sedimentary rocks is called a sedimentologist. Here she is, a sedimentologist. Did we even really need to read the notes? No, this was another one where I was like, oh my gosh, how is this a Module 2 question? This is so easy. All right, 23. We have, when printing paper money for the colony of Pennsylvania in the 1730s, they loved Benjamin Franklin. Benjamin Franklin, then a Philadelphia shop owner, took steps to combat the circulation of counterfeit notes, such as weaving blue threads and muscovite into the paper he used. Okay, so he took steps to combat the circulation. They gave a couple examples of how he did that. Blank, he stamped the notes with detailed imprints of sage leaves that proved difficult for forgers to replicate. Okay, so this part is talking about the paper, like how he made the paper. Then he stamped the notes. I'm literally thinking then, like it's a sequence where first he did these things, then he did this. I don't see that here though, so it sounds like it's just another example of how he took steps to prevent the counterfeit notes, so I'm gonna go with moreover. Okay, we have, following the American Revolutionary War, North American foodways underwent a radical transformation, fueled in large part by spiking consumer demand for certain grains. The cultivation, trade, and transportation of maize and wheat, blank, reconfigured the continent's existing regional foodways into a globally oriented food system. Okay, this goes with the fact that it underwent a radical transformation. It basically reconfigured everything into this. So these things right here feel like specifics. So I would probably say like something like in particular or specifically. So I think it's A. All right, now we're on to grammar. We have 4 answer choices. You can choose between a colon and a semicolon, even though they both separate 2 complete sentences. So I'm definitely going to be trying to figure out if either one of those makes more sense. And then we also have a comma and no comma. We have that the geographic center of North America lay in the state of North Dakota was conceded by all involved. Establishing its precise coordinates proved more divisive. Okay. Here's what's going on. Do we have 2 complete sentences? That's what we need to figure out first. So, that the geographic center of North America lay in the state of North Dakota was conceded by all involved. Okay, was conceded is the verb. And then the subject is the center of North America lay in this, that basically is the subject because it's the idea that this was where it was located. That's a complete sentence because they said it was conceded and then they gave us a complete thought. By who? By all involved. So we have a complete sentence. Now, here's the second part, which is tricky. Establishing its precise coordinates proved more divisive. Okay, so what's our subject here? Our subject is establishing its precise coordinates. That's what proved, verb, and then complete thought, more divisive. This is also a complete sentence. So it's going to come down to A or D. Is the second side going on to explain more or give more detail to the first side? No, these are separate details. It's not going on to describe how it was conceded by all involved. It then goes on to say something that was difficult for them to agree on. So I'm going to go with D, a semicolon, because they're 2 separate thoughts. All right, we have chondrites are stony meteorites that are undifferentiated. That is, their contents have not melted. Okay, all of that was fluff. Actually, not really, because we have a transition word. So this is a shifting transition where though is a contrast. So I need to figure out like a couple things. Do I have 2 complete sentences and where do I need to put the contrast? So I'm already leaning towards B or D, not C or A, because they are hardly pristine though, is contrasting with the first sentence, the fact that they are undifferentiated and their contents have not melted and separated. So even though they have not melted and separated, they're not pristine. So that's where the contrast is at. So the though needs to go in the second sentence to contrast with the first. And then it says, many chondrites experience aqueous alteration as a result of exposure to fluids, as well as fracturing, veining, and localized melting due to collisions with other objects. That's a complete sentence, guys. So we've got to go with the semicolon, definitely not the comma. That would be a comma splice. All right, to manifest the warm and welcoming atmospheres that are a signature of her work, she occasionally relies on more traditional art techniques such as painting with watercolors. Okay, that's all one sentence. That is not 2 separate sentences because this whole part is what's called a modifier. So what I need to do is not pick a semicolon here. And I want to pick A, not B, because you need to have a comma after a transition. All right. We have recently unearthed Neronian tools in France dating to 54,000 years ago and attributed to Homo sapiens may provide evidence that interactions between Neanderthals and modern humans occurred 10,000 years earlier than was previously supposed. A finding that, if true, would overturn current theories about H. sapiens migration during the Upper Paleolithic. Okay, the fact that they're saying a finding that, if true, it means that what finding? We're going on to explain more about what was said here. So that just basically warrants a comma as we're continuing on with the same thought. So I'm going to go with D. All right. Immediately and very quickly on 17, I see a semicolon with an and, which means they're listing three things using semicolons. So I'm going to pick the semicolon. All right. I can already tell that this question is testing us on a modifier. So the modifier says a government body officially known as Althing. We need the subject to come right after. The subject needs to be a government body. So it wouldn't be the world's oldest parliaments because it's just one government body. So that's not parallel. Iceland's parliament is a government body. I'll hold that. The first meeting is not a government body. 930 CE is not a government body. The answer is B. All right, we have her portrait of novelist Zadie Smith is displayed in the National Portrait Gallery in London. I don't need any punctuation. You can read right through that. You guys, I didn't even pause. Let's just keep it simple. All right. Logically completes the text. I'm going to skip this and come back to it. I'm going to skip that. I'm going to skip that. And I'll skip that. So I'm going to skip 11 through 14 because those are the tougher ones. Let's go to 10. We'll work to 1 and then we'll come back. So they said what most effectively uses data from the graph. That means we might need the graph on this one. So we have to complete the statement. What I'm going to do is read the statement, and they might give me some terms I'm not familiar with, so I'll have to read up and see what those terms are. Because efficient national government is necessary to provide urban services and infrastructure that attract economic investment, Mahatra et al. Proposed that absent other factors, the importance of GDP per capita growth to ULE. Okay, I don't know what those are. So let's just go back one. We have in a study of urban physical expansion, these researchers conducted a meta-analysis of more than 300 cities worldwide to determine whether urban land expansion is ULE, was more strongly influenced by urban population growth or by growth in gross domestic product per capita. Okay, so they basically wanted to know, is ULE, which is land expansion. What is urban land expansion? Well, urban means cities. So it's basically taking more land to keep building out the city, which Manhattan really can't do because it's on an island. So there's really no more urban land expansion for New York City. Try to put it in a context like that so that you can understand what it's talking about. Does it influence, or is it more influenced by urban population growth? So basically, when the city's population gets bigger, does that cause them to want to expand? Or is it more influenced by GDP, gross domestic product, which basically means the economy? So if the economy is doing well and more money is coming in, does that make them want to expand? So it says, because efficient national government is necessary to provide urban services. Okay, we need efficient national government. That's necessary. It says they propose that absent other factors, the importance of GDP per capita growth would likely increase relative to the importance of population growth as governments become more efficient. Oh, okay, cool. So basically government efficiency equals, it's going to mean that there's going to be, if population growth becomes more important, then GDP growth also increases. So if true, this suggests a possibility that, okay, so one more time, we've got absent other factors, the importance of GDP per capita growth, TULE, would likely increase relative to the importance of population growth. So as importance of population growth goes up for ULE, so does the importance of GDP per capita as governments become more efficient. So basically, they're both going to go up um, as the governments become more efficient. So let's see what we've got going on here. A says national governments of countries in Region 1 experienced declines in efficiency in the period from 2000 to 2014. Okay, let's use the graph. So it says national governments of countries in Region 1 experienced declines in efficiency. Okay. All right. So if the national governments, this took me a minute to wrap my head around. So this might be one you'll want to skip and save for later. So if the national governments experience declines in efficiency, what would we expect to happen? Well, what we're going to want to see is like it says the importance of GDP per capita growth to ULE would likely increase. So what happens here is the GDP per capita growth goes down. Do you guys see that? So like it's going to go down compared to Region 1. So that does show a decline in efficiency, because if the government was efficient, then that should be going the other way according to the claim. Wow. Okay, let's hold that one and let's just check the others. Countries in Region 1 experienced a slower rate of economic growth in the period than the countries in Region 2 did, despite increasing national government efficiency in Region 1. Well, slower despite increasing. Okay, so that's an opposite. That will not complete the statement, because if there's a slower rate of economic growth in Region 1, then that would mean that the government's efficiency is not good. It's going down. So let's get rid of that. C says national governments of most countries in Region 2 became more efficient in the period from 2000 to 2014 than they had been the period from 1970 to 2000, but those of several countries in this region did not. Okay, this is a could be true, but not enough information, because we can't drill down on specific countries on that graph. So we don't know that part. So don't pick C, even if you feel like the rest of it is right, which it's not. D says national governments of countries in Region 1 and in Region 2 generally become more efficient in the period from 2000 to 2014. Well, I already know that's wrong, because in A, it shows that the GDP is going down, which basically implies the government is less efficient. So I'm going to get rid of D and I'm going to go with A. All right, 9. Which finding from the study, if true, would most directly support the researcher's conclusion? Okay, so we have almost all works of fiction contain references to the progression of time, including the time of day when events in a story take place. A 2020 study, Alan Kim, CP, and SS claim that an observable pattern in such references reflects a shift in human behavior prompted by the spread of electric lighting in the late 19th century. Okay, so when they talk about fiction works and the progression of time, they've noticed a change due to the spread of electric lighting. Basically, I don't know why they said electric lighting, electricity. So to summarize, electricity affected the way that fiction books talked about the progression of time. That makes sense, because at nighttime, if the lights are on and you can do stuff at night, that would change the way that they talk about time in fiction. The researchers drew this conclusion from an analysis of more than 50,000 novels spanning many centuries and cultures, using software to recognize and tally both specific time references, that is, clock phrases such as 7 a.m. or 2:30 p.m., and implied ones, such as mentions of meals typically associated with a particular time of day. Okay, I want to support the conclusion. So we have novels published after the year 1800 include the clock phrase 10 a.m. less often than novels published before the year 1800 do. First of all, the year 1800 is definitely not when electricity came out. So how would that even help us show the change with the spread of electricity? B, novels published after 1880. Okay, that's around the time with Thomas Edison and electricity, so that makes more sense. Contains significantly more references to activities occurring after 10 p.m. than novels from earlier periods. That makes sense because if there's electricity, they're going to do more stuff at night. C says among novels published in the 19th century, implied time references become steadily more common than clock phrases as publication dates approach 1900. Um, okay, so how does that show us though that the spread of electricity affects it? Because that doesn't really show us the electricity thing. So I'm going to get rid of C. D says the time references of noon and midnight are used with roughly the same frequency in the novels. No, same. That means that there was no change. So that's definitely wrong. So if you picked C, guys, that doesn't do enough to show that electricity is what changed things. So really think a little deeper about that. All right, we have what would most directly support the researcher's conclusion. Okay, so we have early Earth is thought to have been characterized by a stagnant lid tectonic regime in which the upper lithosphere, the outer rocky layer, was essentially immobile and there was no interaction between the lithosphere and an underlying mantle. Researchers investigated the timing of the transition from a stagnant lid regime to a tectonic plate regime, in which the lithosphere is fractured into dynamic pieces that in turn allow lithosphere and mantle mixture to mix. Okay, so the tectonic plate regime means the lithosphere is fractured into plates that allow the lithospheric and mantle material to mix. That's important, I think. Examining chemical data from lithospheric and mantle-derived rocks ranging from 285 million to 3.8 billion years old, the researchers dated the transition to 3.2 billion years ago. Okay. Why would they do that? Well, let's find something that can support that. Among rocks known to be older than 3.2 billion years, significantly more mantle are derived than lithospheric. But they don't talk about the amount of mantle. They just talk about how they mix. So I want to find an answer choice that basically touches on that. B says mantle-derived rocks older than 3.2 billion years show significantly more compositional diversity. No, I would agree that that would be the opposite because once they mix, they're going to show more compositional diversity. So if they're older than 3.2 billion years, they didn't mix yet. That's out. That would be like an opposite. C, there is a positive correlation between the age of lithospheric rocks and their chemical similarity to mantle-derived rocks, and that correlation increases significantly in strength at around 3.2 billion years old. No, because if they didn't mix before that, it wouldn't increase in strength. It would literally be at 3.2 billion years and on. They show a chemical similarity, so that's out. D says mantle-derived rocks younger than 3.2 billion years contain some material that is not found in older mantle-derived rocks, but is found in older and contemporaneous lithospheric rocks. Okay, that shows that the mantle-derived rocks that are younger must have mixed with the lithospheric rocks if they contain material that was in lithospheric rocks. That's what we want. That basically gives us the idea that they mixed. All right, what does the text most strongly suggest about the story of Hans Castorp? The story of Hans Castorp that we intend to tell here, not for his sake, for the reader will come to know him as perfectly ordinary. Okay, I'm going to highlight basically adjectives. This is a fiction passage. I want to look for descriptive words. They said he's ordinary. So we're not telling it for his sake. We're telling it for the sake of the story itself, which seems to us to be very much worth telling. Okay, well, why would a story be worth telling? It must be good, right? So it says after that, though, in parentheses, and by the way, always look out for this unique punctuation because it means there's probably something important here. Although in Hans Castorp's favor, it should be noted that it is his story and not every story happens to everybody. So, hey, even though he's ordinary, there's this really cool story that happened to him. So it kind of makes it cool for him. It works to his favor that this is a story that's his story. Okay, it's a story that took place long ago. and is, so to speak, covered with the patina of history and must necessarily be told with verbs whose tense is that of the deepest past. So it took place a long time ago. It needs to be told in a certain way. Let's go ahead and let's look at the answers. A, though it is true that stories of even the most uninteresting people are themselves interesting because all people are unique. Okay, where did they talk about all people being unique in here? I'm going to get rid of that. B, even though it is the story of a person of no particular importance. Okay, I like that so far. He's ordinary. Its age and manner in which it is therefore must be told are both indicators that the story itself is important. I don't know. Like, it does talk about using verbs of the deepest past, but it doesn't necessarily mean those are the indicators that the story itself is important. So that, I feel like you'd be like making an inference when the text didn't actually say that. That's what is a little sneaky about B. C says, like all stories about the lives of inconsequential people, this story must necessarily be related in a particular way if the reason the story is consequential is to be, okay, what? What is this? That wasn't talked about. Let's keep it simple. D, it is a remarkable story that happened to an unremarkable person. Okay, what is the synonym for a remarkable story? Seems to us to be very much worth telling. Okay, what is the synonym for an unremarkable person? Perfectly ordinary. Okay, what is the synonym for some of its value accrues to the person at its center? Although in Han Castorp's favor, it should be noted that it is his story. So it actually benefits him that it's his story. Its value comes back to him in that regard. We are going to go with D. All right, so we have another underlined sentence. So see how this says, for example? It's starting with a transition word, so I really just want to read the sentence before it. So it says, it's plausible that the workshop that produced the tapestry had never produced one so large. And some researchers claim that a close examination of the joins, the places where the panels are stitched together, suggests that the workers developed and refined their joining process over the course of production. Okay, so it suggests that the workers developed and refined their joining process. For example, the first join the workers completed exhibits a clear misalignment of the borders, whereas the later joins are virtually invisible. So basically, when they started out, they sucked at it, and then as they kept going and got more practice, they got better. So they gave us an example of how it showed that it got better over time. So let's see what we've got. It identifies the people. No, it did not. It supports an argument about the workers. Yes, the argument was their joining process got refined. So that it supports that by giving an example. It's not comparing anything. It's not describing how research has determined anything. It's definitely going to be B. All right, we have a poem, which I was wondering if they were doing away with poems. And then I saw this on test 7, and I guess they're not, which was nice to see, maybe. I don't know. A lot of you guys hate poems, so maybe not. But we have the poem, midday, the speaker's on a path in an outdoor setting, and it says, a slight wind shakes the seed pods. Okay, I want to go on because there's a dash, and I want to read the rest of this to see how it relates. It says, my thoughts are spent as the black seeds. My thoughts tear me. I dread their fever. I'm scattered in its whirl. I'm scattered like the hot shriveled seeds. Okay, this sounds like he's comparing the way that he feels and thinks to the seed pods in the wind. He's being scattered just like the seed pods are being scattered. Let's look at the answer choices. We have, it illustrates a change in the natural environment that the speaker implies is responsible. Okay, he's not saying it's responsible for his growing misgivings. B says it establishes an example of consistency in the natural landscape that the speaker then contrasts. There's no consistency in this. It's a slight wind that just picked up. How is that consistent? C says it presents an observation of an occurrence in the natural world that the speaker then expands on to convey a sense in the turbulent interior state. That's exactly what's going on. It's not evoking any ordinariness, so like get rid of D. Process of elimination is your best friend on this test. Let's go to 4. All right, when you're on vocab on module 2, there's going to be some words you likely don't recognize. So what you're going to want to do is put these words on a Google Doc or some, in a notebook. Look up their definitions and know them, because words on the SAT have a tendency to repeat. So desultory basically means there's no plan or purpose. Spurious is not what you think, because you think spur, like spur of the moment, like it's quick, but spurious in this case means false. I noticed the SAT likes to do that a lot, where they'll give you a word that sounds like something. For instance, they've given preclude before, which sounds like it comes before, but it really means to prevent. So that's like one of those fake words, spurious. So be careful. Veritable, you have like the very, like verify. So it comes from like Latin veritas. So it basically means to prove as fact. So proven factual. And then notional, you see the word notion here. So it's basically still an idea. So let's look through the answer, or through the context of the passage, and try to determine which one's best. One popular theory of the origin of the moon, the Big Whack, posits that a protoplanet called Theia collided with Earth, flinging debris into orbit that eventually coalesced in the moon. Until recently, Theia was blank. But until recently, Theia was what? I don't know. I've got a contrast word here. That this next part is going to help me determine that. But researcher Qin Yang and QY, I'm sure I butchered that, and colleagues now claim to have identified pieces of the protoplanet in the lowermost section of the Earth's mantle. Okay, now claim to have identified pieces. So this is one where you have to read deeper for the context. If you go through and you do this superficially, you're going to get it wrong, okay? So let's go back to what they posited. They posited that Theia collided with Earth, flinging debris that coalesced to the moon. They then identified pieces of the protoplanet, which basically shows that instead of it just being something that was a theory or a hypothesis they posited, they now have evidence of it. So until recently, Theia was just notional, but now they have actual evidence. So same deal. Some of these words, guys, you might not know. So put them down on a Google Doc, put them down in a notebook. Demarcated from is basically separated. It's kind of what it sounds like. Demarcated, it's almost like you're like dividing. Reconstituted is basically like reworked. Or like reformed. You see the so you're thinking, okay, something's happening again, right? Conflated with, C-O-N, if you speak Spanish, con means with. So this one is like coming together. Think of like with something as basically combine. And then derived from means to like basically like come from. So let's take a look at this context. So we have diadromous fish migrate between freshwater and marine biomes during their life cycle. The migrations obligate. Okay, you can see the word obligation from this, meaning they like are compelled. They have to migrate. Is why D fish can be blank, those that are merely Eurohaline, able to tolerate high salinity. The Eurohaline black-chin tilapia can survive high salinity, but its life cycle does not involve relocation. Okay, so I'm sensing a difference between the D fish and the black-chin tilapia. So because of that, we want to show a difference, and the only one that does that is a demarcated from. All right, number 2. So same thing. Haphazard means it's like it's not planned. It's kind of random. Contentious, it's like what's the word I'm looking for? What's the word I'm looking for? Okay, contentious, it's like it could be why am I having a hard time thinking of a synonym here? Okay, it's negative. Let me come back to that. Like it's on the tip of my tongue. Ineffectual basically means it like doesn't work, right? Arduous means it's hard. It's difficult. So like, and by the way, going back to B, sometimes try to put a word in like your own context. I've heard of it as a contentious argument. So it's like controversial a little bit. Okay. I think that's the word I was looking for. Okay. So let's go through these. So we have the creation of LR's 1926 animated film, The Adventures of Prince Ahmed, was blank process. Over the course of 3 years, art and her collaborators painstakingly, there's a nice little descriptive word, made over, these images of hand-cut paper. Okay, so painstakingly. So it would be arduous. That's the synonym. At the turn of the 20th century, Black residents of Richmond, Virginia had few formal options. Okay, that sounds bad. They had few formal options. So that's a problem. So rectify means to fix. So that would be the answer there. Now let's go back to the hardest reading questions on this module. All right, we're going to start with number 11. Okay, so we wanted to describe data to support the student's assertion. Now, the problem is when I read the assertion just by itself, I don't have enough context to understand what the heck they're talking about. And that's one thing I've noticed about test 7. You can't cut as many corners as some of the other tests. They designed it in such a way with lots of pronouns and lots of reference where you have to go back to sentences before, which is kind of annoying. But I'm going to start at the top for this one. A student is researching the Chinese government's 1992 shift to a market economy that emphasizes trade liberalization. One means of trade liberalization involves expanding from ordinary imports to an emphasis on processing imports, which have 2 types. Okay, so there's processing with assembly. So we have basically trade liberalization. What happens is there's 2 types. There's processing with assembly, and then there's processing with inputs. So with assembly, in which a firm obtains raw materials from a foreign trading partner without payment and sells the final goods to that partner, charging for assembly. So with assembly, they basically, there's no money involved. They get goods, get raw materials, and then charge after job's done. Okay. With inputs, what happens is a firm expends capital, so meaning they pay money to buy raw materials from a trading partner, processes them into final goods, and sells those goods. So with inputs, they need money, they need capital, and make it from start to finish, basically. They buy the raw materials with the capital. They're not given the raw materials, and then they sell it when they're finally done. Okay, I get a grasp of the 2 different types. That's what you're going to want to do. You're going to want to understand what it's saying. Don't just read it passively and not really grasp what they're trying to say. Try to make it make sense to you. Put it in your own words. We have the student asserts that while initial efforts at trade liberalization were shaped by Chinese firms' limited capital, this situation resolved in the 2000s. Okay, which one requires limited capital? Processing with assembly, because you don't need any money to get started. So if the student is saying the situation resolved during the 2000s, what we want to see is we want to see with assembly go down or be lower, and we want to see with inputs, meaning they have capital, go up. So let's check out the answer choices. Processing imports with inputs were greater than both ordinary imports and processing imports with assembly in 2006. Well, even if that's right, this is only addressing 2006, and we want it resolved during the 2000s. So that is too narrow. I'm going to get rid of A. B says from 2000 to 2006. Ooh, that's better because it's resolving in the 2000s. I like that already. Processing imports with inputs rose much more sharply than processing imports with assembly did. Okay, let's just check and make sure that that's true. So processing with inputs, it definitely did climb higher and rise more sharply than processing with assembly, which is exactly what we wanted. So I'm going to hold B. C says from 2000 to 2006, neither processing imports nor imports with inputs nor processing imports with assembly were greater. Okay, they're comparing the 2 when we want them to be different, so that's out. Processing imports with assembly were greater in 2006 than processing imports with inputs in 2000. No, that doesn't show us that it resolved in the 2000s. If we're just comparing one year in the 2000s to another, it's definitely B. All right, logically completes the text. We have the Uto-Aztecan language family is divided into a northern branch, which includes the Shoshone language of present-day Idaho and Utah, and a southern one, whose best known representative is Nahuatl. Okay, already I'm noticing they're going to be talking about two different things, and since it's illogically completes the text, this is a good time for me to annotate so I can keep track of what is what. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about, or I'm going to put a T-chart. I love T-charts, guys. So we've got a northern language, and it sounds like we have a southern language. So the northern one is the Shoshone. It's in Idaho and Utah. The southern one is Nahuatl, and it's from the Aztecs in Mexico. Okay, lexical similarities across the family, including of botanical terms. Botanical means like plants. Confirmed descent from a single language spoken millennia ago. Okay, so descent or descended from a ancient language. In the US Southwest. From the US Southwest, because it says the origin is what is now US Southwest. Okay. However, vocabulary pertaining to maize isn't shared between northern and southern branches, despite the crop's universal cultivation among Uto-Aztecan tribes. Given archaeological evidence that maize originated in Mexico and diffused northward into what now became the US Southwest, some linguists reason that okay, so what would happen if they descended from the same place in the Southwest, but maize, they have different words? Well, they probably split off into different branches before that word maize came up that way. So that's what I'm going to be looking for. So northern Uto-Aztecan tribes likely obtained the crop directly from a southern Uzo. Okay, no. Variation in maize-related vocabulary within each branch of the UA family likely reflects regional specific methods. Nope, we're not talking about methods for cultivating the crop. Southern UA tribes likely acquired maize at roughly the same time as northern ones did, though from different sources. No, that's not true. The family's division into northern and southern branches likely preceded the acquisition of the crop. Yes, because if they already were divided and then the crop came up, they would have made different words for them. Another logically completes the text. So we have for its 1974 work, Instant Mural, the Chicano art collective ESCO taped members PV and HS to an outdoor wall in East Los Angeles. The work is manifestly a commentary on constraint, but many critics focus on Valdez and the social constraints women faced at that time, which is understandable but leaves the presence of Valdez's male collaborator Sandoval unexplained. We should instead consider, this is the important part, guys. It says we should instead look for basically this is the old belief. They taped up this mural and critics thought, oh, it's talking about the social constraints of women. But now they're bringing up a new idea. This is definitely a typical structure for a logically completes the text passage. And I always want you to look for that. So we should instead consider that in 1974, the art establishment's recognition of Chicano artists was and has long been restricted. Okay, so we're talking about recognition of Chicano artists was restricted to socio-historical muralists, leaving non-muralist Chicano artists struggling to even exhibit their work. Interesting. That's the issue. So here's a semicolon. Attending to this context opens an interpretation that counts for all the evidence, allowing us to conclude that, well, to me, what that would conclude is that 1974 work, Instant Mural, is basically a commentary on how they're having a tough time showing their work, which is why they taped it up to an outdoor wall to make it like a mural. So let's look at the answer choices and let's try to find something that reflects that. We have While Valdez's presence in Instant Mural represents the social constraints placed on women at the time, Sandoval's presence represents Chicano muralists' frustration at their lack of recognition by the art establishment. Uh, well, at least it touches on the lack of recognition by the art establishment. I'll hold that. I'm not really sure if that's what his presence is doing, though. So let's see if there's a better one. The main subject of Instant Mural is female Chicano artists' experience of being doubly constrained by gender role expectations and the marginalization of certain types of art. No, that's not right, because they don't continue to say in the new belief it has anything to do with gender roles. Gender roles is irrelevant to the new belief. Instant Mural is a reflection on the constraining aesthetic expectations placed on Chicano artists in general, rather on the social constraints placed on women specifically. That sounds great to me, because, again, it doesn't talk about gender anymore. Instant Mural is best understood not as a critique of the social constraints placed on women, but rather as a critique of socio-historical muralist depictions of Chicano culture. No, it's not of Chicano culture. It's talking about the recognition of Chicano artists. So I think C is the best answer. All right, last one. Another logically completes the text. So we have an analysis by A.E. and colleagues of coins minted in Sidon in the 5th and 4th centuries BCE reveals a change in their composition over time. While a coin from circa 450 BCE, okay, I'm already seeing them talking about dates. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a timeline and I'm going to map it out. So at 450 BCE, it says that the coin has 98% silver and then 1% copper. Now they're saying at 367 BCE, so 367 BCE, it says it contains 74.2% silver and then 24.7% copper, giving it a relatively yellowish appearance that traders would have noticed. Because coins with a silver content below 80% were considered unsuitable. Okay, so that means that these ones were unsuitable for trade. E and colleagues speculate that a crisis in confidence in the currency occurred in Sidon around 367 BCE, which was likely relieved. Okay, so a crisis happened here. Despite Sidon's persistent oppressive financial obligations as a result of the guy's successor's decision to, well, the only thing that I'm thinking is he wants the coins to be less yellow. He wants them to have more silver in them and less copper, because that's the issue right now. So what answer reflects that? Proclaim that the percentage of silver in coins suitable for trade would be raised to a threshold higher than 80. Well, that doesn't solve the problem because you still have the yellow coins. So you can say, hey, you know, it's suitable if it's over 80%, but they're already making coins less than that. So just proclaiming that does nothing. B, keep the amount of silver in Sidonian coins consistent with that in coins minted in 367, but decrease their weight. Okay, this is almost like a math question, guys, but if you decrease a coin's weight, like let's say you make it thinner or whatever, but then you keep the amount of the silver the same, what's going to happen is the percent of silver is going to go up. So I like that one. It'll make it less yellow. They just basically make the coin smaller or whatever, but still use the same amount of silver. That makes sense. D says, began minting heavier coins with a proportion of silver to copper similar to that in coins minted. Okay, we don't want the proportion to be similar. If they're heavier but the proportion's similar, there's still going to be a smaller percentage of silver. That's not going to work. D says, fund the mining of some copper deposits that were not available. Okay, that's completely irrelevant. The answer is definitely B. All right, guys, that's it for Module 2 English on Bluebook Test 7. All right, guys, we are on Module 1 of the math from Bluebook Test 7. Let's get right into it. Lorenzo purchased a box of cereal and some strawberries at a grocery store. Lorenzo paid $2 for the box of cereal. Okay, that's a flat rate. So I'm looking for that to be here, and the total is $9.60. That's here. 190 per pound of strawberries. That would be that. It's definitely A. All right, number 2, we have the function f is defined by that. When x equals 2, well, you're just going to put in 2 for x. Pretty simple, guys. It's going to be 80. All right, we have the estimated value of dollars of a tablet as a function of the number of months. Okay, what's the best interpretation of the y-intercept? Okay, that's how much it was at the start. So it's going to be how much it was when it was purchased. That's A. Okay, this one's very simple. Subtract 61. So absolute value of P is going to be 4. That means P could be 4 or negative 4. They just give you the positive, so take that one. All right, we have the measure of angle E is 45, so E goes with J, so that means J is 45. Measure of angle F is 20, so if F is 20 and it goes with K, K is 20. What's the value of J? Oh, I didn't even need to do all that. It was 45. Okay, it says a ball was launched from a 7-foot tall platform. I can see the picture there, and it says, what of the following graphs could represent the height and speed of the ball X seconds after it was launched when the platform is 2 feet shorter? So it's going to move down 2. So that means it'll be like here. So I want to go find one that's just above 6. Here it is. It's going to be B. The ratio of X to Y is equivalent to the ratio 9 to 5. Okay, cool. So 9 to 5, X is 162. What would Y be? Then you just solve. So we're going to cross multiply. We have 5 times 162 equals 9Y. Let's divide both sides by 9. And let's see what we get. We get 90. At a state fair, attendees can win tokens. Oh, this is interpreting an equations problem. How many more points is a circle token worth than a square token? Well, a circle token is worth 90. A square token is worth 80. How many more points is that? 10. What's the solution? Well, I can see that these two can cancel out. So basically, x minus 9 equals 7. Add 9 to both sides. X equals 16. Done. Okay. We have 12t plus b equals c relates to the variables, da, 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 da. What expresses the value of c minus b? Okay, well, that's really easy because when I just subtract b from both sides, I actually get c minus b equaling 12t. What is an x-coordinate of an x-intercept of the graph? Okay, it could be 14, it could be -5, or it could be -4. So that's why they said what is and, meaning there could be more than one. I'll just put 14 down. The function f is defined by f of x equals 5 times 1 for okay, what is the value when, okay, that's our x value. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to put in 1/4 in for x. That'll make this 0. So we basically have 5 times 0 squared plus 11/4. The answer is going to be 11/4. A circle in the xy plane has this equation. What gives the center of the circle and its radius? Well, you're going to change the sign. So if this says -13, the center is at 13. And then if this says -k, it's going to be at 13k. That's r squared. So the radius is 8. And that would be A. The circle has a radius of 2.1 inches. The area of the circle is b pi square inches, where b is a constant. What is the value of b? Well, the area equals pi r squared, right? So b is going to be the r squared part. So you're going to do 2.1 squared, and that gets 4.41. So that equals B. Okay. They said, what was the average rate of change for the recorded temperature of the air chamber from x equals 5 to x equals 7? Okay, x equals 5 is here. X equals 7 is here. Rate of change means slope. So I'm basically going from, let's see, we've got 14 up to 24. So I'm going up 10. And then I'm going over 2. So 10 over 2 is going to be 5. That is the rate of change. All right, the solution to the given system of equations is xy was a value of 39x. Okay, this is pretty cool because what happens is when we add these together, we get 0 equals 13x minus 6. Add 6 to both sides. 6 equals 13x. Multiply both sides by 3. 18 equals 39x. The answer is 18. Okay, so how much time in minutes does it take for the number of bacteria in the population to double? Well, it looks like we've got 790 on the bottom, so we need 790 minutes to make one iteration. So to have the exponent be a value of 1 where it will exactly double because the 2 in the parentheses means then it would double. So we need every 790 minutes for it to double. All right, we have what is the value of 2 minus 4x? Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add 7 times 2 minus 4x to the other side to combine like terms. So now I have 5 equals 16 minus 2 minus 4x. I only have one of them. I'll take the 16 away to the other side. So then we're going to have 5 minus 16. What is that? -9? Oh my gosh. I don't feel like doing that mentally. -11. Haha. Thank God I didn't. Okay. And then what we need to do is divide by the negative. So 11 equals 2 minus 4x. That's what they wanted. So the answer is 11. All right. Scientists studying the life cycle of dragonflies counted the number of dragonflies in a certain habitat each day for 46 days. On February 15th, there were 99 dragonflies in the habitat. The percent increase in the number of dragonflies in the habitat from Jan 1 to February 15 was 12.5%. How many were there at the start on Jan 1? Well, I'm just going to work backwards. These are all the original amounts. So if this was the original amount on Jan 1, to basically increase it 12.5%, I'm going to multiply by 1.125, and I want to see if I get 99. And I do. And that's how many there were on February 15th, so I know that the answer is A. 20, we have one solution to the given equation can be written as this, where k is a constant. Okay, just as a reminder, guys, that's derived from the quadratic formula. And then k underneath the square root, that is b squared minus 4ac. That's your discriminant. So all I need to do is get our discriminant. Our a value is 2, our b value is -8, our c value is -7. So when I plug that into this, I get -8 squared minus 4 times 2 times -7. We get 64 plus 56, and that's 120. Cool. Okay, we have the function f of x is defined as 19 more than 4 times the number x. Okay, so let's write that out. So we've got f of x equals 4x plus 19. They said, what's the best interpretation of the x-intercept? X-intercept means y equals 0. So I'm going to set this equal to 0. So essentially, x is going to equal -19 So when y is 0, the number is -19 That is exactly correct. All right. This question is derived from the complementary angles rule, which basically states if two angles are complementary, then the sine of one of the angle is going to equal the cosine of the other angle. So that means this and this equal each other, because 24 plus 66, they're complementary. And then that means this and this equal each other. I don't know how much they are offhand, and I don't want to mess with my calculator. This is derived from right triangles. So I'm just going to posit, like, let's just pretend sine of 24 was 3/5. Like it's a 3, 4, 5 right triangle. So cosine of 66 would also be 3/5. And then cosine of 24, maybe that's 4/5. And then the sine of 66 is 4/5. So what happens? Well, we end up just squaring them, right? So we get like 3/5 squared plus 4/5 squared. What would be the same as that? Well, not multiplying by 2. So we basically, like, cosine of 66 is going to get us 3/5. Cosine of 24 is going to get us 4/5, or vice versa. These would be the same according to the complementary angles rule. So we need this one, because this basically would get us that situation. All right, that's it for Module 1 Math. All right, guys, we're on Module 2 Math. If this video is helpful to you, show me some love. Hit the like button below. I'll keep coming out with free content just like this to help you guys get ready. So we have, for how many of these 15 days did the battery receive a charge of 0 kilowatts? Well, it looks like 0 kilowatts would be 6 days. The answer is D. Okay, which of the following is closest to the slope of the line of best fit? Well, I see a point here at essentially 3, 7. So then I see another point here at like 4, 9. So we're basically going up 2, and then we're going over 1. So the slope would be 2. In a sample, 80% of the items are faulty. There are 88 faulty items. Okay, so if 80% are faulty, I'm going to set up a proportion. If there's 88 faulty items, how many total items are there in the sample? I'll cross multiply and then divide by 80. So the answer is 110. For the exponential function g, the table shows 4 values. Which equation defines g? Okay, so when we look at these, basically, I want to look at a point and see if it makes sense. So if I go to like negative 125, this one makes sense to me because when you take a fraction and then you take it to the negative first, basically that means 1 over 1 to the 25th, which would equal 25. So I can totally get why D is the right answer there. If 8x equals 6, what's the value of 72x? Simple proportion multiplied by 9 on both sides. That's how you get 72x. That's going to equal 54. Which expression is equivalent to that? Okay, exponent rules. 15 minus 5, that means we have h to the 10th. 7 minus 21 would be q to the negative 14th, which essentially means it's h to the 10th over q to the 14th. That's A. All right, we have a company fills boxes with approximately 23 pounds of oranges. To test accuracy of the filling process, 344 boxes of oranges were selected at random and weighed. Based on the sample, it is estimated the average weight of all boxes is 23.1 pounds with an associated margin of error of 0.19 pounds. Okay, so that means if we have 23.1 pounds, it could be above that by 0.19 or it could be below that by 0.19. So plausible values are going to be between this range. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, what value of x is the solution to the given equation? So when we go and solve this, I'm just going to basically make these fractions have like denominators. So I'm going to multiply this by 2 over 2, and I'm going to multiply this by 3 over 3. So now I have 2/6 times x plus 6 minus 3/6 times x plus 6 equals negative 8. That way I can combine like terms. So I basically have negative 1/6 x plus 6 equals negative 8 times negative 6 on both sides. So x plus 6 equals 48. Take away 6, x is going to be 42. Okay, we have f and g are given, and in functions f, b is constant. If we multiply those two together, we get this. Cool. What is the value of b? So our middle term is what's going to help us determine b. So if we multiply these guys out, this times this and this times this gets us our middle term. So we're going to have a negative 27x cubed plus 9bx cubed, and that's supposed to equal negative 26x cubed. So if I add 27x cubed to both sides, essentially 9bx cubed equals x cubed. So when we divide by 9, x cubed, the x cubes cancel, and so b ends up equaling 1/9. All right, 10, we have line S passes through the point 0, 0 and is parallel to the line represented by the equation y equals 18x plus 2. So that means S is just going to be y equals 18x. Same slope, but the y-intercept's at 0, so it's basically plus 0. If line S also passes through the point 4, comma D, what is the value of D? Okay, well, I'm going to put D in for y, and I'm going to put 4 in for x. So it's basically just 18 times 4, which is 72. All right, the function f is defined by the given equation. For which value of x does f of x reach its minimum? Okay, minimum is where the vertex is at. If I have a solution at 44 and 46, then the axis of symmetry is going to be right in between at 45. So x is going to equal 45 when it reaches its minimum. All right, in triangle XYZ, angle Y is a right angle. Okay, let's draw this. So we've got triangle XYZ. They said Y is a right angle. Point P lies on XZ and point Q lies on YZ such that PQ is parallel. So let's put P here. Let's put Q here. It's going to be parallel to XY, so that's going to be a right angle. They said XZY is 63, so that is this angle down here. It's 63 degrees. What is the measure in degrees of angle XPQ? Well, this angle right here is going to be 180 minus 63 minus 90. So let's see what that is. Okay, so that angle up there is 27 degrees. Now, this shape right here, guys, is a quadrilateral. And I'm trying to find this right here. Hang on, let me make that a different color. I'm trying to find this right here, the orange dot. So basically a quadrilateral is 360 degrees. So I'm going to take away 90. I'm going to take away another 90 because we have a 90 here and a 90 here. I'm going to take away the 27. That'll tell me what's left. 153. So we have in a set of 4 consecutive odd integers. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to call the first integer x. Since they're odd, they're skipping one. So the next integer is going to be x plus 2. The next integer is going to be x plus 4. And then x plus 6. Here's the first. Here's the second. Here's the third. Here's the fourth. So we've got the product of 12 and the fourth integer. Okay, so the fourth integer, so it'd be 12 times x plus 6 is at most. So that means it's going to be less than or equal to the sum of the first and the third integers. So the first and the third integers, and then it says 26 less than those, so minus 26. So that'll end up being 24. But let's just see how they structure it. They said, oh, sorry, the first and the third. I did the first and the second. Sorry, guys. So 26 less than the first and the third. That'll look like that. So that's going to be A. All right, in the given system of equations, G and K are constants. The system has infinitely many solutions. What is the value of G over K? Okay, I know infinite many solutions means that these are in proportion to each other. So I want to know what the scalar multiple is. Essentially, what do I multiply 2/7 by to get 5/2? So if I multiply by the reciprocal, then that means that the scalar multiple is 35/4. Okay, so I'm going to take 2/5 and multiply it by 35/4 to get G. And then I'm going to take 7/5 and multiply it by 35/4 to get K. So we've got hang on, let me do this right here. We've got 2/5 times 35/4. Well, the 2 and the 4 cancel and end up with a 1 and a 2. So we get 35/10. That's G, which basically is 3.5. Okay, then maybe I'll just leave it as a fraction. Let's leave it as 35/10 for now. I'm not even going to reduce it or anything. Okay, now let's do K. So K is 7/5 times 35/4. So 5 cancels with the 35. So we end up with 49/4. That's K. So we've got G. We've got K. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set G over K. Now keep, change, flip. All right. These are both divisible by 7, so we get 5 and 7 when we reduce it. These are both divisible by 2, so we get 2 and 5. So we end up with basically 10 over 35, which can reduce. So that actually could be 2/7. Really? Okay, that was like, that doesn't seem right to me. It's 2/7, so I guess we're good. Another way you could do that is put it in Desmos. I didn't want to put this one in Desmos because there was 2 constants, which means 2 sliders. And because there's fractions, when you try to move around in Desmos, if your answer is a fraction, it's really hard to get that. You're going to be messing with it a lot. It's just easier to do this one by hand. Okay. The table shows 3 values of x and their corresponding values of y, where s is a constant. It's a linear relationship. Okay, if it's a line, there's 2 things I want. I want the slope and I want the y-intercept. So I'm going to look at the slope, rise over run. Rise is it's going down 3. Run is it's going up by s. So our slope is rise over run. So it's going to be negative 3s. So now what is the b? Well, the b is going to be, let's find out. Let's take a point. I'm going to take the point s and 15 and put them in for y and x. So I'm going to say, okay, 15 equals negative 3s times s, and then I'm going to solve for b. The s's cancel. I'm going to add the 3 to the other side. So b is 18. Okay, cool. B is 18. Here's the issue, though. If we move these around, right? First off, like let's just go with a. So I subtract the sx to the other side, and then we divide by 3. Well, that's not going to work because that's not going to give us a b of 18. Now let's try b. So I basically subtract the 3x. So now I have sy equals negative 3x plus 18s. Well, now when I divide by s, this is perfect. I get 18 as my y-intercept, and I get negative 3 over s as my slope, so b is the right answer. Okay, 16. In the given system of equations, k is a constant. The system has exactly one distinct real solution. What is the value of k? Well, this is, there's like a couple ways we can go about this. We could use Desmos, but I mean, maybe I'll just do that. Yeah, I mean, you could solve it by hand and then try to find the discriminant and stuff, but I just feel like that's going to take a little bit longer. I would rather just type those in and move k around until the graphs just touch exactly one time. So let's do that right now. Okay, so as you can see, here's my line and here's my parabola. If I move k, it looks like to get them to touch once, I have to keep going in a positive direction. So I'm going to change my interval from 10 to 100. Let's keep going. Oh, I think I just got it. Ah. Okay, let's zoom in. So let's try 16. Oh, let's try 18. Let's try 17.5. And there it is, 17.5. It hits exactly one time. All right, we have the function f is defined by 1/2 x plus 6. So it's a value of 4. Then, well, that would be 1/2 times 10, which is 5. That felt so easy for number 17 module 2. I don't know. I don't get it. Okay, so we have an area of a rectangular banner is this. Okay, the banner's length x is 24 inches longer than its width. Okay, so if I draw a rectangle, length is x, and then width is going to be x minus 24. So when we multiply those together, we end up with x times x minus 24 equals 2661. That means we're going to subtract the 2661 to the other side. So I want to see a minus sign there. And then we have also a subtraction sign when we distribute to the 24. It's got to be A. Almost done, guys. A few more. So we have a right circular cone has a volume. Okay, I wrote the volume formula. You can get that from your reference sheet on Bluebook. So we have basically the area of the base. This is the area of the base, pi r squared, guys. So basically now I know volume is this. The V is, oops. The V is 71148 pi. I'm just substituting. Pi r squared is 5929 pi, and I'm solving for h. So let's go ahead. We're going to basically multiply both sides by 3 to get rid of the 1/3. So we end up with 21,000. Nope, lied. 213,444 equals 5929 pi h. There's a pi there too. Now let's divide by 5929 pi on both sides. So the pi's cancel, this cancels, h is going to be 36. Okay, but we're not done. They want the slant height, not the height. So with a cone, this is what is going on. We got the height of 36. It makes a right angle. They want this. This is the slant height. Here, let me highlight that for you guys. We want this. So we need to know what the radius is. Pi r squared h, they said, was the 5929. So if we basically square root 5929, that's going to get us what the radius was. Yes. Okay, so the square root of 5929 equals 77. That's going to equal the radius. So now it's just the Pythagorean theorem. So we have 36 squared plus 77 squared. That's going to equal x squared. Now, use logical reasoning. It's a hypotenuse. All of these are too small. It has to be 85. All right, 20 is a great one for Desmos. So let's pop that in. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to type each answer choice underneath. Now, I know historically when you're at the end of a module, Bluebook really, or College Board really likes to bury the answer at the end. So I'm going to start with D and work backwards because the chance of it being D is much higher now. I'm going to add a slider. So let's hit the home button to get to the graph. Now look at when I move the slider around, it's perfectly on the line. That's how I know it's D. So my strategy worked. The answer is D, and I'm done. All right, this is a tricky linear problem. So it says the cost of renting a carpet cleaner is $52 for the first day. So we've got 52. And $26 for each additional day. Now, I'm going to multiply by, oops, D is days, not X. Sorry, guys. I'm going to multiply by D minus 1 because the first day is already accounted for with the 52. So we have to take the first day out from the rest of the total days before multiplying by 26. When you distribute, you end up with 52 plus 26D minus 26. And then you combine like terms, so 26D plus 26 is the right answer. All right, last one. We have the speed of a vehicle is increasing at a rate of 7.3 meters per second squared. Okay, guys, this means we need to square time. So if there's 60 seconds and 1 minute, when we square that, that means there's 3,600 seconds squared and 1 minute squared. This is basically what we're going to use in our conversion, okay? We can keep this conversion because we're just talking about meters, not meters squared. So let's start out by writing what we have. We have 7.3 meters per 1 second squared. And then we want to convert that to miles. So I'm going to multiply by, I want to put meters on the bottom, so 1609. That way meters will cancel with meters. I'm going to put 1 mile on the top. Now it's going to be in miles. And then I want to change the second squareds to minutes squared. So I'm going to put 3,600 seconds squared on top. So the second squareds cancel with the second squareds and 1 minute squared on the bottom. And now I'm going to multiply straight across. So I'm going to basically do 7.3 times 3,600. So that's going to be 26280. And that's in miles because that's the only thing that's left up top. And then on the bottom, I have it over 1609 minutes squared. So we'll divide that by 1609. So we basically get 16.3, which is B. All right, guys, that's it for Bluebook Test 7. I hope you enjoyed this walkthrough. Make sure you subscribe to my channel and make sure you go get our free workbook. I'll see you guys next time. Happy prepping.